Hey folks, how's it going? Glad to be back, glad to have you back. Real quick, if you've been enjoying Almost Normal, I've started posting some exclusive stories over on my Patreon. Stuff like the Halpern arc and the Lindholm files. Little side paths into the town of Harrows' weirder corners. Standalone ghost stories, if you want to call them that. They all circle back. No pressure, just if that sounds like your kind of rabbit hole, the link is in the description. Alright, let's get into it. This is part 4 of Almost Normal.
The light was already on. That's the first thing I remember. Not turning it on, not flipping the switch or even reaching for it. It was just on. Yellow and soft like the kind you see in late night diners. Buzzing faintly, warm, but wrong. I don't remember opening the door either, but I was halfway down the stairs when I realized it was open. That I was moving, barefoot and slow, like I'd been walking in my sleep, and just now caught myself in the act. Only it didn't feel like my house. Not anymore. The steps were wood for the first few, and then changed, quietly, sneakily to tile. Cold and echoing under my heels. Somewhere behind me the door clicked shut. I didn't look back. The walls widened. The light grew steadier, brighter, but somehow farther away. I passed a rusted cart. The kind nurses use for bedpans and blood pressure cuffs. An IV hook dangled above me like a crooked finger. The smell hit next. Lemon cleaner and heat. Harrows Memorial Infirmary. Established 1946. That's what the sign said on the wall. I stood in front of it for a long time thinking about the date, thinking about what I remembered from the town records, the name, the missing woman, Agnes Vale. There was a flicker at the edge of the hallway, movement, not fast, not threatening, just watching. I turned the corner and walked deeper past doors with no handles and gurneys that faced the wrong way. There was no one screaming, no one calling out, just the hum of lights and the gentle pat, pat, pat of my own feet. Something whispered behind the wall. Not words, not really. A shape of breath that sounded like it might have once been a sentence. One of them always stays. I didn't know who them was, but I kept walking. The hallway turned again, then again. At some point I stopped being sure if I was going deeper, or if the place was folding around me. I woke up in a bed with paper sheets, thin, rustling. My skin stuck to them like I'd been sweating through someone else's dream. There was no window, just a rectangle where one should be. Boarded over and sealed in duct tape. A clock ticked without moving. The fluorescent light hummed above me like a bad thought. A plastic bracelet circled my wrist, white, smudged. 214, male. Observation, sleep contamination suspected. I sat up. My bones felt hollow. My tongue tasted like copper and cotton. The door across the room was slightly ajar. I could hear footsteps outside. Rubber soles on tile, and every so often the rattle of a gurney wheel. And then the voice. Good. Awake is good. A man stepped inside wearing a white coat and a sharp smile. His clipboard was perfectly clean. Too clean. Like the pen he held had never actually written anything. Dr. Lindholm, he said. You're in Harrows Memorial. You've been moved here for specialized observation. Do you remember why? I opened my mouth. No words. He seemed fine with that. You were experiencing recursive sleep drift. Very rare, but we've seen it before. He made a mark on the clipboard without looking at it. We'll be monitoring your dreams. Not to worry, though. Only during the safe windows. 3 to 3:20 a.m. He leaned in lightly. Anything beyond that gets messy. From the room beside mine, a woman muttered something, low, rhythmic, like counting stairs in reverse. Lindholm straightened. Try not to speak with the other patients. Their memories tend to, ripple. He left. The light flickered. The woman muttered again, and something far down the corridor laughed like it remembered me. Later I wandered. The door hadn't been locked, or maybe it had and forgot. The hallway was longer than it had been. Ceiling vents hissed every few feet, and every third door had a slot in it like a mailbox. Some of them were open. Some had names etched into plaques below the numbers, but scratched out hard, like someone didn't want to remember who they were. I passed a nurse. She didn't blink, just handed me a paper cup with water that smelled faintly of bleach and whispered, "You'll forget this part when you wake up." I didn't drink it. Further down there was a room with no lights. Inside was a patient strapped to a chair facing the wall. He wasn't moving, just humming. It sounded like an old lullaby, but off-key and too slow. A bulletin board hung outside the room. There were notes pinned there, the yellow kind. One of them just said, "You're still in here." I kept walking. Back at my room, the clock still hadn't moved, but the bracelet on my wrist now said something else. 214, male. Sleep inversion suspected. Monitor closely. I didn't remember it changing, and I wasn't sure the bed had only one pillow before. Agnes Vale had always been a quiet sort, even before the dream started. Not shy, not timid, just quiet in the way people get when they've seen something they can't unsee, and Agnes had. She just didn't know when. She walked the hospital halls in bare feet and borrowed robe, ignoring the hush-hush of nurses who never seemed to blink. They moved like stagehands between scenes, always just out of sight, always just out of the light. Room 5B had no bed, just a mirror and a wooden chair. She sat in it every night, and every night the mirror changed. Once it showed her in her wedding dress. Once it showed her older, gaunt, hair streaked with ash. Once it showed her nothing at all. The walls ticked sometimes. Not clocks, walls. Like teeth behind plaster. Agnes carried a notebook she couldn't remember picking up. She hadn't written in it, not that she recalled. But the pages filled anyway. One page simply read, "Don't trust Lindholm's clipboard. It's already read you." Another, "Stop talking to mirrors. They keep what you give them." She didn't sleep, but she dreamed. Dreamed of woods and fog, of a house on fire, of voices that came from vents. One night she woke up crying because she'd heard a name she didn't know how to forget. Mason. No last name. Just that. Spoken like an apology. In the cafeteria, if it was still called that, Agnes watched people eat meals they didn't touch. A woman beside her spooned air from an empty bowl and said something about how the notes are watching. Agnes nodded. She'd seen them too. She passed a nurse in the hallway who whispered, "You're not supposed to be here yet," and smiled like she meant it. Once she found a room filled with wheelchairs, each one occupied by a mannequin. Their mouths were open. All of them wore hospital bracelets labeled "Unknown." Another day, though time wasn't really passing, she followed a sound down to the laundry corridor. It was humming, familiar. She turned a corner and saw herself folding bed sheets. No one else noticed. Not even the other her. She stopped sleeping altogether after that. Later that night, the mirror in 5B showed a man she didn't recognize. He looked tired, afraid, like he was losing track of which part of himself was real. He mouthed something at her. 3 words. She stood slowly and whispered back, "I know you." They came for me at 3 a.m. sharp. Not with gurneys or syringes or armed orderlies. None of that. Just two nurses in pale green uniforms that didn't quite match. One of them had her cap pinned backward. The other had eyebrows that looked painted on. Neither spoke. I followed them barefoot across linoleum that sounded like frozen leaves underfoot. The hallway lights flickered as we passed beneath each one, but only after we were already through, like they were waiting. We stopped at a door labeled Induction Room B. Under it, Authorized Minds Only. They opened it and gestured for me to enter. I did. Inside was a reclining chair, the kind you see at dental clinics or execution chambers. Dr. Lindholm stood beside it, smiling like we were about to start a therapy session, not an experiment. "You've been selected for an observation protocol," he said. "We'll let your subconscious build the construct. Just follow where it takes you." "And what if I don't want to sleep?" I said. "You're not sleeping. You're remembering forward." He attached a single wire to my temple. It didn't sting, didn't hum, it just settled, like it had always been there. Lindholm stepped back and nodded. 317 to 320. That's your window." The lights dimmed. I closed my eyes. I opened them in my old house, except it wasn't my old house, not quite. The kitchen was too clean. The fridge didn't hum. The clock on the microwave just said, yes. The table was set for two. The second plate was empty. I walked toward it and sat down. Across from me was a book. Same leather cover, same title. I tried. But this time, there was something wrapped around it. Bandages soaked in something yellow and stiff, like it had bled too long to dry properly. I reached out and unwrapped it, opened the book. It was full. Not of my handwriting, not of the voice I knew as mine. Agnes Vale. She had written everything, and it was all ahead of me. Whole pages detailing things I hadn't lived yet, places I hadn't seen, people I hadn't spoken to. One entry caught my eye. He thinks he's the only one. He always thinks that, they all do, until they see the door again. And beneath it, in a different hand, "You're being read. You're not the first. Try not to be the last." A wind kicked up behind me. I turned to look, but the kitchen door was gone. There was only a mirror, and it didn't show me.